All right, hello all, and welcome back to Dance Costume Construction Quarantine, week number 3. All right, I hope everybody's doing okay, hanging in there. So, we've gotten through week number 1, which was measurement isolation, into week number 2, which was circle skirt pattern isolation. Now we're into week number 3, which is cutting circle skirt fabric isolation. All right, you got it? All right, up to it? All right, let's do it. So we've got our circle skirt pattern that we did last week. We're now going to cut this piece of this shape out. We are going to then put it onto our fabric that you probably have found out by now. You're probably working on the floor. You don't have a nice table to work on, so floor is great. So you lay your fabric out on the floor as flat and even as you can. We will lay our cutout pattern on top of it, lining up the long edge with the selvage, and we will cut this out on one side, and then we are going to flip it and do a mirrored image across the other side, kind of lining it up with the opposing selvage edge. Okay, so that's the basic of what we're going to do. Now the detail. Okay, so we are going to start by making this a little closer for you so you can see a little better. So we're going to start by cutting out the edges of our shape here. Now, it would be great if you all do have some just paper cutting scissors. That would be ideal. If you just have the scissors I sent in the kit, that will have to be okay. So I do have some paper cutting scissors. I will use these. So we're going to cut along the center back edge. We're going to cut the waistline there. We're going to cut the center front edge, and then we're going to cut that hemline all the way around to the starting point as to where you start cutting. Okay, so I'm going to use my paper scissors, and I am going to cut. These are pretty good scissors, so they're sliding really well. You don't have to slide them. All right, I'm going to cut my waistline. I'm going to cut right on that line. Cut this out. Okay. Then I'm going to cut my center front line out. Okay, and then I'm going to come along and do my hemline. So I'm going to cut this out all the way around. I'm going to twist it around so it's still in frame. Okay, I'm going to switch it over from the other direction. This part we don't need now. We can get rid of it. Okay. Let's pull it over here so you can see it. Let's come back. There we go. Okay, so I've got a completed shape. Okay, so this shape is of course half of our completed skirt. So I've got to cut 2 of these. I'm going to cut one this direction, and then I'm going to switch it over and do one on my other side of my fabric, which you can't see at this moment, an opposing half circle on that side. Okay? All right. More detailed. All right, I've laid my fabric out. Like I said, I do want to make sure that the cross grain is nice and flat. And the grain line, right? This is the grain line because this is my selvage edge. My grain is parallel with my selvage edge. So I've laid that flat, if I can get it, across my table / floor. Okay, so everything's nice and flat. I'm going to lay my paper flat on top of that. Okay, I'm going to start. Remember how we wrote a half seam allowance on our center back? Okay, so that's where this is going to come in. I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch from my selvage edge of my fabric here, and at a 1/2 inch, I'm going to place the edge of my center back line. Okay, so I can use my see-through and measure a 1/2 inch here and place my center back of my pattern along that edge. Of course, I want to make sure I've got enough fabric top to bottom too. So maybe a little closer, hopefully. No, now you're out of frame. Okay, never mind. We can't do that. Whoop, wrong way. There we go. So I have a 1/2 inch from that selvage edge to my paper. Okay, now you can use your scissors. I just want to use something just to hold the paper in place. Sometimes I use weights. You can use anything you have in your house. It'll hold it down. Okay, so also this here should be 1/2 inch from the center front edge to your selvage is also 1/2 inch. Okay, so this is in place. So now what I get to do is mark the finished edge all the way around my white paper. Okay, so I'm going to take my number 2 pencil and I am going to just mark right along the edge of that white paper all the way around. When I get to straight edges, I do like to use a ruler just because it makes it faster. I can do it on the curved edges, so I'm doing lots of little straight lines, or you can just run the pencil along the paper. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to keep marking this. Okay, I'm going to go up the center front edge, right along that edge. Okay, so I've got a line around the edge of my white paper. Looks like this is edge trying to run away. Okay. Okay, so we've accommodated the center back seam allowance. Now we haven't done anything about our waistline seam allowance yet. Okay, so now we've got to do that. So I am going to give myself another line beyond the paper edge that is a 1/2 inch. So I am going to take my ruler and kind of tick off a 1/2 inch from my paper. So I'm going around this edge here and marking a new 1/2 inch beyond my paper. So 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, and this will end up being my cut line for my waist. Okay, all right, so I've gotten my line traced all the way around my paper. I have gotten my 1/2 inch seam allowance line around my waistline. Okay, good so far? I hope so. Okay, so now I can get rid of my pattern. Okay, I will need it again. I'll need it for the opposing side because it takes 2 pieces to make a complete circle, right? Okay, now for this, we are going to cut now. I am going to, of course, need my 1/2 inch seam allowance on my center back. So at the top corner of my center back, I am going to write CB, right? Just as I had put it on my pattern. just as I had put on my pattern here, I'm also going to write it in my seam allowance here on my fabric. So I'm going to put it right there on my fabric. Oh, I'm so afraid you can't see this. Maybe you can. Is that better? Maybe that's better. Is that a little better? Now you can see the CB. Okay, that's better. Okay, so, and I'm also, no, I'm going to put CF, I'm going to put it at the top here for just for right now. All right, scissors, you ready for the scissors? Okay, so I'm going to pull back a little bit so you can see the whole thing now. Okay, okay, scissors. We're going to use the scissors at our seam allowance line for our waist. We're not cutting on our paper pattern edge. We're going to cut on our seam allowance edge, which is a 1/2 inch away. So I'm going to cut it here. Cut around there, so I leave my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, that goes in the trash can. I'm also going to cut down my center front line. Okay, this is going to be an open line, so we're going to get into the garment this way. So there's no seam, so basically that seam allowance can go away because we will not be needing it. Okay, the next place we need to cut is our hemline. We're not going to be actually hemming this skirt, so this is going to be our true finished edge for what we're doing, so we can cut along that edge. So I'm going to cut along that finished edge here. If we were going to do any hem on this skirt, I would have added seam allowance to this, and